Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cooking with Clams. I'm Will, and we're down here in what I would like to call sunny Key West, but today, as you can see, pretty dreary, pretty rainy. Now, we do get bad days, believe it or not, and this is one of them. On days like today, obviously, fishing's pretty much out of the question, diving's out of the question. All I want to do is stay home, make comfort food, something heavy, cheesy, just, fit the weather. We got a couple of cars driving by, so I apologize. What we're gonna make today is arancini. Now, if you haven't heard of arancini, it's Sicilian rice balls. If you haven't heard of Sicilian rice balls, I'm gonna tell you what it is. Headed over to Neil's house. It is pouring rain, which poses a small problem. The lobster are in Neil's pen, and they're live, which I want to keep them live pretty much until I dispatch them. When we pull them out of the pen, as this rain hits them, they have a higher chance of dying. So we're going to pull them out of the pen and throw them in my cooler that I have with me pretty quickly, and I'll try to get them home fast, and we'll try to make this happen. It's okay if they die, you can still use them. It's not the end of the world. See, this is the best part about Key West, is that on a day like today, you're not going in the water this late in the season, you're not finding lobster unless you know the right people. Then you're getting fresh lobster. We got these guys back live, and I'm going to use the whole body. So I'm going to use the tail, and that's going to go into our risotto, but I'm going to make our risotto with the stock that I'm going to make from the legs, the antenna, because there's actually a lot of meat up here in the antenna, and bodies, of course. Now, like I said, we got these guys back live. I just recently learned the quickest way to dispatch a lobster, because a lot of people take the tails off. Little inhumane. You go in right above where that meets their carapace, where their legs, and you go right underneath. And that's it. And now I gotta break them up because we're gonna make a stock for our risotto. Now this stock I'm going to make really simple. It's just going to be the shells from the lobster, and I have here onion with the skin still on, garlic with the skin still on, carrot, celery, and parsley. And we'll add a bunch of sea salt to that stock. And these guys are pretty clean inside, but we don't want our stock murky, so you just take a spoon, go in and take out some of the guts. And that's good to go. There's a lot of meat in these knuckles. Starting our stock, a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. And the first thing I want in the pan is our broken up lobster. I want to toast up those shells a little bit. And then when those start to take on the red color that you're used to lobster having, I'm going to add my vegetables, then add a lot of sea salt, and then my water, and let this simmer probably about an hour, if not a little bit more, but I'll keep tasting it as I go, and then strain it, reduce it, and then we'll make our arancini with it. We'll make our risotto with it. Our stock is all ready to come off. So you can take a look at that.
Oh man.
So the lobster gives it a really deep color that in the carrots. So one of the things I do is take out as much as you can before we pour it through the strainer, and that'll save you a lot of trouble. Also, do not throw it directly into your garbage can. I learned this lesson the hard way. It will melt the trash bag. So we pour it now through the strainer without all the big pieces in there. But that is a beautiful lobster stock ready for risotto. So one of the first things I'm going to do now is cook off our lobster. I took our tails and I chopped it down into pieces about the size of a dice. And with this, I don't even want to cook it all the way through, because then we're going to add it to our risotto as that's cooling, and then we're going to deep fry the risotto. So if I cook the lobster all the way through, completely cook it, then put it in the risotto, you're going to have little pieces of tire in there. So we don't want that. And I am going to cook it with butter. Everything in this recipe is going to be pretty rich, that's for sure. So we put in our lobster, a little bit of salt, touch of olive oil. So I want it just cooked through. So right now, it's a little bit translucent. I want it a little bit further than that, but just on the cusp. Now on to our risotto. Now if you haven't made risotto before, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's boring, it's tedious. But the end result is so good that it's worth it. It's one of those things that you hate every minute of it until it's done. So you start out first with more butter. And I have this on medium high, pretty much just medium heat. And I have here 3 cups of arborio rice. You want to use arborio rice because it's a very high starch rice, and the starch is what's going to make our risotto creamy and stick together. You don't want to rinse it off because you want all that starch. And the constant movement keeps breaking the starch up. That's what keeps adding more starch into the dish without actually adding starch. So we put that in, and we're going to give it a little bit of a toast first. And what this does is starts the process of that starch breaking down. So this takes about 2 minutes. And then we're gonna add a little bit of garlic, a little bit of onion, and toast that as well, and then we'll start adding our stock. And the thing about risotto, you cannot stop stirring. So now you hear a little bit of the sizzle of the rice, changes color just a little bit. We're gonna add a little more butter to the center there. And our garlic and our onion. We don't want anything to brown. All we're trying to do is sweat it out, that's it. And what will actually help that too is just a little bit of salt on top. Now we sweat that probably for about a minute, and then we mix it into the rice, and then we add our first ladle full of our lobster stock that we made. In goes our first ladle of stock. And you keep adding 1 ladle at a time. You stir it, you let it cook off a bit. Let the rice soak it in. The rice will break up the starch. then we do another. And it's a lot like emulsifying a sauce. The slower you go, the better. If I was to dump in all that stock, I would just end up with boiled rice. Now I know it's tempting. It will be tempting to put 2 ladles of broth in. Don't do it. You have to do one at a time. So our risotto is pretty much through. It's just al dente. And we don't want it too loose. We want it pretty thick. But we don't want it so thick that it ends up becoming too dry. So you gotta get it in a perfect place. And that you just feel in your heart. I don't know how to explain it. So first, we have Parmesan cheese. A bit of red pepper flakes. Our lobster. Now I'm going to take this completely off the heat because I don't want that to cook the lobster anymore. Now, chopped parsley. Give it a taste, see if it needs anything at all. Lemon. It's got just the right amount of spice from the cracked red pepper. Cracked red pepper? Crushed. Crushed. And because arancini are so heavy, so rich, that little bit of lemon we just put in is going to brighten that up. We're going to put it onto a sheet pan and spread it out, and we're going to let it cool completely. So we're going to put this into the fridge, let it cool down completely, and then once it's cool, we're going to form our little risotto balls, bread them, and fry them. Now, we have to make our breading. So some people use eggs, and they do the flour to the egg, to the breadcrumbs, but I was in Sicily and I learned a pretty cool trick. So just all-purpose flour, and then we're gonna fill that with just water. And you make a slurry. Almost the same kind of thing that you would have to make paper mache. So it's almost like pancake batter. That'd be the closest thing that I can compare it to. All right, we're gonna put that on the side. We have just plain breadcrumbs. These are on the side also. Now we have to roll our arancini. And the best thing that you can do is have a bowl of water. So you wet both hands. And I would say about a little bit bigger than a golf ball, a little smaller than a baseball. Because when you deep fry them, you want them to come out hot. You don't want to have to put them in the oven. Because then if you put them in the oven, you're going to lose a bit of your crunchiness on the breadcrumbs. So about that size. Now another trick is that if you roll your balls and they sit too perfect, that means they're a little too firm. They don't have enough liquid in them. So when you bite into them, they're going to be dry. So if you roll them into your ball, then you put them down, and slowly they lose their shape. That's the perfect consistency of risotto. We're gonna bread our arancini now, and what I like to do is put a couple into the slurry. And then into our breadcrumbs. And this is where it gets a little bit time consuming also, because when you go into the breadcrumbs, you want clean hands, clean, dry hands, which whenever I'm breading anything, I find that difficult. So the history of arancini was that the hunters in Sicily would go out and they needed lunch. And the original arancini had bolognese in it. So it had ground beef, and the wives would make the arancini, deep fry them, but they made them huge, absolutely huge, And when they're fried, they would retain their heat and they would be hot for when they had lunch, and they would pull them out of their bag while they were out hunting and eat them. The name comes from little oranges, and because when you fry them, they look like little perfect oranges. And now my oil's heating up. I want it to be at 375. I want the arancini to not cook too quickly, the breadcrumbs, and just have to come out of the oil too fast, because then our arancini will be cold in the middle. I don't want it to cook too slow, because then it'll just soak up oil. So I want it to be at that perfect 375 to where it goes in, has enough time to warm up all the way through, and cook the breadcrumbs to a golden brown. We got our oil to about 375. I'm not totally sure in here, but I'm gonna guess it's about 375. Let me check. Yeah, it's 375. I can tell. You want a paper towel to receive the arancini in, because you want to put them down and have the excess oil come off. Now, one of the better things you could do is actually have a rack so that they're not hitting the paper towel and just sitting in their own oil, but we're only going to do a couple of them right now, so this will be okay, and just swap out the paper towel. Now, putting them into the oil, I've made the mistake of trying to put them in with my hand. Don't do that. You want to put them in either with a slotted spoon or a pair of tongs. And remember, the more you put in, you're going to drop the temperature of that oil. So that's why you want that oil at the perfect 375. Now those are going to take about 2 to 3 minutes to cook. When they come out, they're going to be a golden brown. And like I said, the center will be nice and hot. It's a little hot. And you also want to make sure you don't overcrowd your pan when frying, because it will boil over. Deep frying in the house is an extreme sport. So these are our finished product, nice and crispy, which is important with an arancini. And you want to fry them and serve them. You don't want them to sit around, because that risotto inside is still releasing moisture, so that batter on the outside is going to get less crispy by a minute. But another important thing that I feel like I have to tell everyone is the hot pocket rule. You will burn your mouth on these if you try to bite into them. So break them open first. And let that steam out. But look at that. The lobster cooked perfectly. Our risotto cooked perfectly. They're still moist inside. They're not dried out. Probably still gonna burn my mouth, but I can't wait any longer. Now, if you had risotto, you know how good risotto is. Deep fried risotto is taking risotto to the next level. The lemon in there brightens it up. The lobster, and the lobster stock is important to just back up the flavor of the lobster itself. And the parsley just kind of brightens it up. Our parsley is still nice, bright and green. It is rich. It is comfort food. On a dreary day, this will warm you up, and afterwards, you're gonna need a nap. Well, thanks for this episode of Cooking with Clams. If you enjoyed it, hit like, hit subscribe. I got a lot more coming, and I really appreciate the comments. I've been reading them, responding to you guys, and it's been great feedback. If there's anything that you want to see, or anything you could think of, or challenge me to, or whatever, I'm into it, and I'll do it for you guys. Okay, we're gonna eat these before they're not crispy anymore, and I'll see you on the next episode.